Thor Love and Thunder has finally been released, directed by Taika Waititi, starring Chris Hemsworth, Natalie Portman, Tessa Thompson, Christian Bale, among others. After the events of Avengers Endgame, Valkyrie is now the new leader of the new Asgard. Thor is off with the Guardians of the Galaxy on these various galaxy-romping adventures, but then the arrival of a certain creature or a certain god killer, Gorr the Butcher, has arrived, killing gods and is in a desperate need to find something that he lost a long time ago. With the help of certain unlikely allies, such as Jane Foster, Thor embarks on a mission to stop Gorr the God Butcher, who kidnaps the new Asgardian children. When it comes to Thor in the MCU, I really like the character. I wouldn't call him my favorite though. Being a Captain America guy, I've made that pretty obvious, and I also like Iron Man, but in comparison to the other characters in the franchise, Thor is not really high amongst many people's lists, at least as far as I can tell. I know he's got some fans, but not as many people hold him in as high of a regard, if you know what I mean, like Captain America or Iron Man. And as far as the quality of his solo movies, they've been very up and down. I really love the first one. I still think that's the best Thor movie to this day. Dark World, in hindsight, I could do without that. Ragnarok was better than the previous one, but the comedy was just way too much for me, and it was a stylistic choice that I was not really entirely fond of. Some of it I thought wasn't too bad, but the villain stuff with the Grandmaster by Jeff Goldblum, who I really like as an actor, I don't know, it just didn't really do it for me. I'll save that for another time. We're gonna get off topic here. But Taika Waititi has returned to the directing chair, and I figured that it was gonna be more or less the same as Ragnarok, although I was hearing that they were leaning more into the comedy of Ragnarok, and I was really scared going into it. I was saying, please don't kill it with a joke. Please don't kill it with too many jokes, please. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised considering how people are feeling about MCU Phase 4, but the consensus at this point is very much all over the place. I'd say a lot more split than Multiverse of Madness was, or even for that matter, Eternals. A lot of people are saying that they're feeling fatigued over the MCU and that this movie is a clear example that it has to end now. Certain people that I and a certain other follower of mine have come to call them as the film bros, if you know what I mean. I'm not gonna say any names here, but they act like that they're above these movies and that they're just a bunch of garbage films and they're ruining real art, and that they have to go by the wayside in order for real cinema to thrive again. I think that's pretty ridiculous and very pretentious to say that, because I think you can include films like Scorsese alongside films like this, because cinema is cinema, entertainment is entertainment. It shouldn't matter what genre it encompasses. And there's other people that are going to say that this movie is too agenda-driven, trying to push female empowerment over somebody like Chris Hemsworth, who's reduced to being a buffoon in this movie. You're going to hear a lot of people who lean towards a certain political ideology that it's going to push some kind of a political agenda. I don't really think that really matters at this point, because I just want to go to this movie to have fun. And I think that's what we as an audience member should be going into it for. I'm going to get off my soapbox now, but where I stand on this movie, with some spoilers, not everything, but there are some things I'm going to go into. This is not a flawless movie, but I actually think this is a really good time, and I think it's much, much better than Thor Ragnarok. Chris Hemsworth continues to shine as the titular character, and they really go for the comedic timing with him this time around. I think sometimes almost to a fault, similar to what we saw in Ragnarok, and a little bit of that in Avengers Endgame when he was putting on his body weight, the whole melted ice cream thing. I'll never get over that line from Endgame. That was just too good to pass up. But I also think that him deflecting with humor was done for a purpose. After everything that this guy has been through, losing Jane, losing Loki, failing to stop Thanos causing half the universe to be wiped out, now he really doesn't know where he stands in the world or in this whole universe. He's basically built walls around his heart. He won't let anybody come in. This movie is basically him trying to learn to open his heart again to other possibilities. And it takes his ex-girlfriend, Jane Foster, for him to finally have that ability to open his heart again to whatever might come his way. Star-Lord basically calls him out on this and saying that I'd rather feel a certain way than feeling empty inside by pushing people away at an arm's length. Other characters like Valkyrie and Korg, is it Korg or Kor? Taika Waititi plays him. It's that rock creature. I don't know. I can never remember his name. All of them in their own ways are pointing out the certain boundaries or walls that Thor has built up around himself. Throughout the course of the movie, when Jane Foster shows up again, his shell starts to break and he's able to finally get his feelings out to her and how he really feels about her that he never forgot about her, and in many ways he still wishes that he could have done things differently, preventing their breakup. Chris Hemsworth, in a certain scene when they're on their way to that moon to find Gore the God Butcher, he does the fast talking thing like Vince Vaughn does, but at least for me, in a way you could tell that he's really pouring his heart out to her. Kinda didn't really prepare that speech, but then again, how often are you gonna get that chance again? The chemistry between Jane and Thor, off the charts here. I liked the romance in the first movie. The second one, it didn't really grab me anymore. Now I feel like there's a lot more emotional weight to it. Jane, this time around, played by Natalie Portman, is suffering from a terminal cancer illness and is somehow worthy to be able to wield Mjolnir. And it took me until before I turned on the camera just now to figure out, how did Jane become worthy of Mjolnir? We learned from the narration by Taika Waititi that Thor made Mjolnir promise to keep Jane safe under any circumstances. So I guess in a way, even after Mjolnir was broken into pieces, it still felt a strong connection to Jane Foster and was protecting her in the way that it knew how. I also kind of like that Stormbreaker and Mjolnir had their own personalities in some ways, which makes them feel like their own characters, kind of like the Millennium Falcon in Star Wars. I gotta admit, while I was excited about the idea of Natalie Portman being the new Thor, I was worried that it was going to come off as too obviously political. I did not get that impression at all, and I think that in a lot of ways it served the story, because Jane is dealing with cancer, and she's desperate to try to find something to cure her of her illness. When she reads through certain Norse mythology books and how it could really benefit her physical health, out of desperation she decides to go to New Asgard to find Mjolnir, and she feels it calling to her, just like Thor made him promise to do so. Considering that Mjolnir is going to be held by anyone who has pure-hearted intentions, Jane Foster was willing to help anybody with her scientific endeavors, because she felt like she was benefiting other people. Like the one character she talks to in the chemo treatment clinic about the movie Interstellar, explaining certain scientific bridges of time and reality, or whatever she says. It actually makes me want to go back and watch Interstellar again. I haven't watched that in 8 years since its release. Man, I got a lot to catch up on. And I think that this is the best that Natalie Portman has been as Jane Foster. Her being in this franchise has done wonders for her, especially right now when you consider the other big franchise that she was a part of, the Star Wars prequels. Not to get too deep into that conversation, she was handled much better in the MCU. That's all I'm saying. Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie, it took me a little while to get on board with her, but now seeing how she is in this movie, I really like her. And she had the emotional pull in Ragnarok when she lost her sisters in that battle that I believe Hela was involved in. I can't remember. Like with Jane Foster, I was worried that it was going to come off as too female empowerment, and it definitely is there, but it's done in the way that I think is fit. She doesn't put down Thor because he's a guy. She does kind of call him out on his BS because he acts like he knows everything, and he really doesn't. Very much in line with how Thor has been this whole time since we got to know him. He's still pretty arrogant and stupid in many ways, even though he's learned a lot over the course of 12 years, or 15 years if you factor in how long the timeline of the MCU events have gone. Even I could admit that he was acting like a moron, so... Russell Crowe shows up in here as Zeus. Out of all the people they could have gotten to play Zeus, they had to go with Russell Crowe, the gladiator. I guess you couldn't have gone with anybody else. He was very larger than life, or he tried to act all larger than life. He had this big grand introduction and this big lead up to what his answer would be for giving the lightning bolt to Thor, and all that build up was for him to answer no. He kind of got on my nerves after a while, but thankfully he's not in the movie for very long. On the one hand though, like him and certain other actors that show up in here, it gives other actors in Hollywood the chance to dip their toe into the Marvel universe. Like that stage play that we see of Ragnarok, Matt Damon shows up again as his character from Ragnarok. I literally started laughing when I saw him in there. Sam Neill plays Odin in that stage play. Sam Neill, Alan Grant from Jurassic Park. And Melissa McCarthy shows up as Hela. Yeah. Thankfully, she's only in there for one scene. It's cool to see other different actors get a chance to dip their toes into the Marvel Universe. And speaking of other actors, Christian Bale has now officially made his mark in the MCU. Gore the God Butcher. Marvel, I think, has finally started to catch on to the common complaints that they've had against them, where the villains are just very one-note and they're pretty disposable. Not the case here. Gore the God Butcher is very sympathetic and very understandable with his motivations, but also really scary and creepy. And that's a testament to Christian Bale as an actor. He's arguably, I'd say, the most versatile actor alive. Goes from funny, charming, sympathetic, scary, awkward, and weird, all in one scene, and it doesn't feel out of place in the slightest. Seeing him in the opening of the movie, going to that god that he's been hoping for some kind of relief when his daughter passes away, is a perfectly good understanding of why he is the way he is throughout the film. Kidnapping those kids from New Asgard in order to get Thor out in the open because he needs the Stormbreaker to get through that Eternity statue to find his daughter, and maybe release the Eternity God, whatever that might be. I'm not too familiar with the Marvel comics in that respect. And to my knowledge, from what I understand, they took a lot of ideas from the story Love and Thunder. I believe that it was the comic book storyline of the same name. Certain imagery like this. There's probably other stuff that I'm forgetting, but that's the one that comes to mind. Obviously, a lot of people have mentioned, with Christian Bale being the bad guy, the whole either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. That was definitely playing through my mind a couple times while watching him. But whenever I saw his yellow eyes, I just couldn't help but think of what Aunt May said in the first Spider-Man.
Those eyes! Those horrible yellow eyes!
If I saw Christian Bale's Gore the God Butcher standing at the foot of my bed, also when they show up at the moon that he's living on and they all get caught in those vine things, I couldn't help but think of the whole Devil's Snare scene in the Sorcerer's Stone of Harry Potter.
Kill us faster! Oh, now I can relax!
But that scene also does play into the emotional weight that pulls you in with Jane's cancer diagnosis. Gore can clearly see that she's mortal and that she's not going to have much longer to live, even though she's very powerful with Mjolnir. And that's one thing that I'm really glad that Taika Waititi was able to do. I know other people feel differently, but as for myself on my end, I think that they managed to hold a beat just at the right amount of time and not throw in some stupid joke to kill the mood. That was probably my biggest criticism with Ragnarok. Just when we actually got an emotional moment to linger on for a little while, somebody or something came in with some stupid gag or some comedic timing or whatever, and it completely put the kibosh on that moment. They kind of do that sometimes in this one, but I think for myself, they found the right balance of it. And I was almost in a way waiting for the moment to happen where it was gonna have a joke come in and kill it. Thankfully though, for the most part, never happened. I think that's kind of his style that he does in his other movies like Jojo Rabbit. I haven't seen any other movies he's done outside of Thor, but it almost kind of makes me want to see what his style is like. And his character does a narration for certain things that Thor has gone through, where we see how things went between him and Jane. Narrations tend to be hit and miss for me sometimes, but I think in this case it was appropriate and it fits the overall tone that Taika Waititi was going for. There was an element of humor in there, but they do throw in enough emotional beats to make us take it seriously. And that's probably the one big compliment that I can give this movie, is that it is a very hokey adventure and a comic book movie down at its core, but it doesn't forget to take itself seriously when it's needed. Like most of the MCU, or the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, the first two at least, and even the first two Superman movies with Christopher Reeve. They have a really good blend of campiness and lightheartedness, but they also find a good blend of drama in there without making it too tonally inconsistent. As far as my criticisms go, I mentioned how Zeus I thought was kind of obnoxious. The first 40 minutes for me takes a little while for the movie to get going. There's a lot of catching up for us, establishing where things have been, setting things up for where Jane is gonna go, explaining to us what happened between her and Thor, which is all necessary information, but sometimes it does feel like a little too much of an info dump after a while. Thankfully, when Jane gets Mjolnir, that's where the movie starts to take off for me. And a lot of people have mentioned the screaming goats. The first time they showed up, I thought, oh god, this is gonna get old really quick. Thankfully, they were in there for a purpose and not just for some kind of a stupid comic relief kind of thing. The screaming, though, sometimes, every once in a while I kept saying, guys, shut up. Just shut up. And as for the climactic battle, when Jane finally is able to defeat Gore, Gore is able to finally reunite with his daughter and bring her back from heaven, therefore giving himself into heaven or eternity, whatever you call heaven in this universe. That whole scene, I don't know if I necessarily was tearing up, but I almost felt that need inside my chest where I thought, I think I might want to cry here because this is really touching. And Jane's death was handled so beautifully, where she disappeared into golden dust, into the realm of Valhalla, where she meets Heimdall in the post-credit scene. Because of her deep acquaintance with Norse mythology and Thor, naturally I think the people of Valhalla would welcome her into their paradise, and I thought that was a really, really beautiful scene. Sure, it's not going to be the last time we see him there, and probably not the last time we'll see Jane in the MCU, depending on what they do with the multiverse. Either way, it was a really nice moment. Thor's finally able to open his heart to new possibilities and adopting Gore's daughter as his own. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's actually Chris Hemsworth's real-life daughter. It's no wonder why they feel so naturally like father and daughter together. It almost kind of reminded me of Joel and Ellie in The Last of Us. Just the way they snark at each other, but you could tell they still care for each other. Imagine Thor as a dad. That'd be quite a sight. Oh, and the film's use of Guns N' Roses music, Welcome to the Jungle, Paradise City. Now I can't listen to that music the same way anymore. I would think of Terminator, since they had the song You Could Be Mine in Terminator 2, but now thanks to Thor, totally different perspective. Mid-credits and post-credit scenes as of late in Phase 4 have been kinda for the most part, or just kind of whatever. Same for the Shang-Chi mid-credit scene or the No Way Home mid-credit scene. This one proposes a lot of interesting directions they could go in with this character.
Hercules, 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 Hercules.
More than likely we'll send him after Thor. To see him battle Hercules, possibly. I know a lot of people who are into mythology, they're gonna get a kick out of that one. And as far as OG MCU characters, I'm more than happy to see Chris Hemsworth as Thor stick around for the foreseeable future. And I think he was more willing to stick around for a while longer. So at the end of the day, I really like Thor Love and Thunder. It takes a little while to get going in the first 40 minutes establishing what's been happening, but then it really culminates into a very fun and campy, yet very emotional adventure. I've said before and I'll say it again, I'm always happy to stick around and see what the MCU can offer. Speaking of that, I'll try to keep this as brief as I can, but I'm seeing a lot of people trashing MCU Phase 4. I have yet to watch Ms. Marvel on Disney+, but I don't really think that Marvel's blowing it right now. I think out of all the stuff that I've seen so far, I've had some gripes with the way they've handled certain things creatively. I feel like there's more hits than misses. A lot of people love No Way Home. A lot of people like Shang-Chi. I don't really hear that many people talking badly about it. There's a lot of reasons that I could go into about Phase 4, and I'm not going to go into that here for time purposes, and I just don't have the energy for that right now. I might do a video on how I feel about Phase 4 and where people are standing on it right now, because I feel like something needs to be said about this. And if it's going to take someone like me to say it, might as well jump at the opportunity. Because I know some of you guys feel the same as I do, and I think it's important for us to get our voices out there. It doesn't hurt to have a different perspective on this stuff. Those are my thoughts on Thor Love and Thunder. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are, whether you like the movie, love it, or if you hate it or think it's okay. Whatever the case is, just please respectfully tell me in the comments below. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on Love and Thunder, and I'll see you guys in the next one.